In the glamorous world of Formula One, where drivers show up to circuits in private jets and luxury cars worth millions, it's pretty insane to think that one of the sport's most determined drivers once called a cramped caravan his home. Today we're taking a look at the incredible career of Esteban Ocon, a story of sacrifice, determination, and a family who bet absolutely everything on a dream that seemed completely impossible.
Pedig azt látjuk, Ocon lukker døren.
He comes out, zero.
For slow motion, Esteban Ocon.
There's a big puncture there, as we can see. On the inside.
Born in 1996 in Évreux, a quiet town in Normandy, Esteban entered a world completely removed from motorsport madness. His parents weren't wealthy industrialists or former racing drivers. Laurent worked as a mechanic, and the Ocon household was pretty typical in working-class France. But when Esteban was 7, like many French children, he was introduced to karting, not as a stepping stone to professional motorsport, but just as fun for a boy fascinated with anything that moved fast. However, from his very first session, it became clear that Esteban possessed something special. Laurent would later recall that most kids take months or years to develop the feel for a kart, but for Esteban, it was like he'd been driving his whole life. However, talent alone doesn't create champions. In karting, success requires dedication, equipment, but most importantly, money. Loads of it. For our working-class family from Normandy, the financial demands seemed impossible. Entry fees into competitions, tire costs, fuel, transportation, accommodation, it all added up quickly. That's when Laurent made a decision most parents would find incomprehensible but felt inevitable to them. They'd sell their house and use every dollar to fund Esteban's racing career. But for 11-year-old Esteban, the sacrifice didn't feel like hardship, it felt like adventure. The family drove circuit to circuit across Europe in the caravan, loaded with spare parts, tires, tools, and all the equipment necessary to maintain Esteban's kart. Laurent's mechanical skills became invaluable, not just for racing equipment, but keeping their mobile home running across thousands of miles yearly. When Esteban would finish a racing weekend, the caravan stopped in front of his school and went off the next weekend for the next race. In 2008, aged just 12, Esteban achieved his first major breakthrough, winning the French Cadet Championship. He'd beaten a field including several future Formula One drivers, most notably Pierre Gasly. In 2010, as Esteban continued dominating French karting, his performances caught Lotus F1 team's attention. This was the break the family had hoped for, validation from a Formula One team that Esteban's talent was genuine and worth investing in. However, joining the Lotus program also meant leaving karting behind and making the transition to single-seater racing, a jump that had ended many promising careers of drivers who couldn't adapt to new challenges. In 2012, age 16, Esteban made the karting to single-seater jump by joining Formula Renault 2.0. In his rookie Formula Renault season, Esteban showed flashes of speed that had made him successful in karting. He scored several podium finishes, demonstrating he could adapt to single-seater challenges. While he didn't dominate like in karting, he showed enough promise to convince observers he had potential for higher levels. The 2013 season brought greater success. Competing in Eurocup Formula Renault, Esteban scored 2 victories and finished 3rd in the championship. However, it was next year that Ocon finally had the opportunity to show the world what he was made of. In 2014, 18-year-old Esteban joined Prema Pau team to compete in the Formula 3 Championship. The 2014 F3 field was exceptional, featuring Max Verstappen, a 17-year-old Dutch driver already being praised as one of motorsport history's most promising talents. Verstappen had Red Bull backing and was widely expected to dominate, before moving directly to Formula One. However, from the season's first race, it became clear that Esteban could not only compete at this level, he was going to dominate it. He won 9 races, scored 15 pole positions, and stood on the podium 21 times out of 33 races. These weren't just impressive statistics, they represented dominance rarely seen in such competitive championships. However, the most significant aspect wasn't just that he won, it was that he beat Max Verstappen, who finished 3rd in the championship behind both Ocon and Tom Blomqvist. Esteban's dominant 2014 European Formula 3 performance had the desired effect. It captured Formula One team's attention and established him as one of the world's most promising young drivers. First tangible recognition came at the 2014 season's end, when Lotus F1 invited Esteban to participate in postseason testing in Abu Dhabi. However, perhaps more significantly, Esteban's 2014 success caught Mercedes' attention. In 2015, Mercedes invited Esteban to join their young driver program. So, with Mercedes' backing secured, Esteban graduated to GP3, the final stepping stone before Formula 1, racing with the prestigious ART Grand Prix. While Esteban won only one race during the 2015 GP3 season, his remarkable consistency saw him finish second in 9 consecutive races, a streak demonstrating consistency that Formula 1 teams value highly. This secured him the 2015 GP3 Series Championship as a rookie, adding another impressive achievement to his resume. At 19, Esteban now held championship titles in Formula 3 and GP3, establishing him as one of his generation's most accomplished young drivers.
I'm very happy, especially for the comeback of the team.
In early 2016, Ocon was placed as reserve driver with a newly reformed Renault F1 team, allowing him to participate in practice sessions while continuing development. But his breakthrough came in a way none could have ever anticipated. In August 2016, Mercedes and Renault finally arranged for Ocon to join Manor Racing, replacing Rio Haryanto from the Belgian Grand Prix onward. After years of preparation, sacrifice, waiting, Esteban was finally achieving his Formula 1 dream. And by the way, Spa wasn't just any race, it was the circuit where Esteban achieved his very first karting victory as a child, where his motorsport journey had truly begun. Now, nearly 15 years later, he'd line up on the same circuit for his Formula 1 debut. The race was dramatic as well. Spa that year featured multiple high-profile incidents, including a crash involving Vettel, Raikkonen, and Verstappen on lap 1, and a severe crash by Kevin Magnussen at Eau Rouge. Amidst the chaos, Ocon still managed to finish 16th. His best result came at the Brazilian Grand Prix, where he finished 12th under extremely difficult rain-soaked conditions, just 2 spots away from points. Overall, Ocon finished 23rd in the Drivers' Championship. Yes, Manor were a backmarker team. Nobody expected anything spectacular from them. But despite that, Ocon's composure and maturity earned him a full-time race seat with Force India for 2017. On paper, it looked perfect. Force India was a well-regarded midfield team known for punching above their weight. Perez was an experienced driver who could serve as a benchmark and mentor. In reality, the partnership would produce some of recent F1 history's most controversial on-track incidents.
A crazy journey, really. It's been a really good season, and I'm really happy with the progress we made.
Force India in 2017 was a transformed team. Under technical director Andrew Green and team principal Otmar Zafnar's guidance, they developed the VJM10 into genuinely competitive machinery, capable of regularly challenging for points and surprising everyone with occasional podium finishes. For Esteban, this represented his first real opportunity to show what he could do in competitive machinery. In his rookie Force India season, Ocon scored points in each of the first 5 races, establishing himself as a regular top 10 finisher. Unfortunately, the first signs of team rivalry with Perez started showing about that time as well. The first major flashpoint came at the 2017 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Racing in 4th and 5th positions, an excellent Force India result, the 2 pink cars were running together when Esteban attempted to overtake Perez, following a safety car restart. The contact that followed sent Esteban into the wall, Perez to the pits with damage, transforming what should have been a fantastic Force India day into a nightmare. While the team tried presenting a united front publicly after the race, behind the scenes there were heated discussions about racing etiquette and team orders. However, if Baku was a warning shot, what happened at the Belgian Grand Prix was a full war declaration. On this particular Sunday, Ocon and Perez found themselves racing wheel-to-wheel again, both running in points. The first incident occurred on the opening lap, both Force India drivers running 3 wide with Nico Hülkenberg through the legendary Eau Rouge corner. To be fair, contact was almost inevitable, and Esteban brushed the wall but continued without major damage. But what happened on lap 28 was far more serious. Approaching the same spot where they'd tangled earlier, Esteban pulled alongside Perez on the long straight, looking to make an overtaking move. At speeds approaching 300 km per hour, the contact was terrifying. Esteban's front wing was destroyed, Perez suffered puncture, debris scattered across the track, Forcing immediate safety car deployment, both drivers' races were ruined, and Esteban's reaction was explosive.
Guys, what the honestly, what the this guy doing? Front wing broken now.
The war of words quickly escalated beyond the track, both drivers taking to social media to defend positions and criticize each other. At that point, Force India's management had seen enough. The team that prided itself on allowing drivers to race freely was forced to impose strict limitations on their on-track battles, implementing team orders that would prevent future incidents. For Esteban, Team Order's imposition was particularly frustrating. He felt he had been a victim of Perez's aggressive driving, yet was being equally penalized for defending himself. Moreover, at just 20, he believed he was being held back by an older teammate who used political connections to gain advantages unrelated to pure speed. The tension between drivers never fully disappeared, but to their credit, they largely avoided further on-track incidents. Both continued scoring points regularly, and Force India finally benefited from having two fast drivers. However, despite strong performances, Esteban's Force India future was becoming uncertain due to factors way beyond his control.
I've been training since December in a high altitude and been putting some kilo on, so I feel very much ready for the season.
By mid-2018, Force India was facing severe financial difficulties, threatening the team's survival. The solution came from Canadian businessman Lawrence Stroll's consortium acquiring the team's assets and securing its future. And however, Lawrence Stroll's son, Lance, was also a Formula One driver, and it quickly became apparent the team's new ownership would create opportunities for the younger Stroll. So despite Esteban's consistently strong performances, clear speed advantage over many grid drivers, Ocon found himself without a seat in Force India for 2019. But that didn't really matter, as Esteban had been widely expected to join Renault for 2019, with reports suggesting agreement had been reached. However, Daniel Ricciardo's shock decision to leave Red Bull join Renault suddenly eliminated that opportunity, leaving Esteban without options as other teams had finalized driver lineups. It was pretty clear that this situation got to him, and the 2018 Brazilian Grand Prix provided a backdrop for one of Esteban's early career's most talked about incidents. Takes time, his opponent wasn't his teammate, but Max Verstappen himself. The incidents occurred when Ocon, running a lap down in his Force India, attempted to unlap himself by overtaking Max, who was the race leader. While technically legal, this was extremely unusual. Drivers who are lapped typically wait for safer opportunities rather than challenging the race leader. As the two cars went wheel to wheel through turn 2 at Interlagos, contact occurred that spun Verstappen's Red Bull out of the lead, handing victory to Lewis Hamilton. For Verstappen, who'd been cruising toward a certain win, the incident was devastating. After the race, in full view of television cameras, Verstappen confronted Esteban in the garage, pushing him multiple times. When asked if he regretted pushing Ocon, Verstappen was unrepentant. "What do you expect me to do? Shake his hand? Say thank you very much for being second instead of first?" The stewards investigated the incident, placing blame squarely on Esteban and penalizing him for the collision. Verstappen, meanwhile, was sentenced to community service for his post-race physical confrontation. This incident added another layer to Esteban's growing reputation as a driver who seemed to attract controversy. And that's probably one of the reasons nobody wanted to risk putting him in their car for next year, except for one team that still believed he was still a solid driver.
A croissant. And I returned home with the croissant. And then I ate the croissant.
Esteban spent 2019 as Mercedes reserve. While being relegated to sidelines was frustrating for a competitive driver in his prime, the year provided valuable lessons and development opportunities. Working closely with Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, Esteban gained insight into what it took competing at Formula One's very highest level. Perhaps most importantly, the year away from racing gave Esteban time to reflect on his career to that point and consider how he might approach future opportunities differently. The controversies with Perez and Verstappen had created a narrative around his driving that wasn't entirely accurate, but had nonetheless become part of his reputation. The Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff remained a strong supporter throughout this difficult period, publicly stating confidence that Esteban would return to racing in a competitive car. And Toto Wolff was right. I'll give him that. Esteban's return to Formula One with Renault in 2020 represented a fresh start, an opportunity to rebuild his reputation. Paired with Daniel Ricciardo, one of the grid's most respected and well-liked drivers, Esteban found himself in an environment completely different from the tense atmosphere that had characterized his Force India years. And by the way, I've made an entire video about Ricciardo and his time in Formula 1. I mean, I like the guy, but he's kind of a bag chaser, if I'm being completely honest. And hey, don't forget to subscribe if you like the video so far. I'm closing in on 25,000 subscribers, and I wonder if we can hit that number before the F1 summer break. Initially, Esteban struggled to match Ricciardo's pace, which wasn't entirely surprising given his time away from competitive racing. However, as the season progressed, his performances improved steadily. The breakthrough moment came at Sakir Grand Prix in Bahrain. In a race filled with drama, Esteban seized his chance to score his first Formula 1 podium, finishing second for Renault. After years of controversy, setbacks, disappointment, Esteban was finally achieving the success his talent had always promised. And while that was sweet, 2021 would bring a completely new challenge for him.
We normally lower it a little bit for Yuki, but I'm so sorry, we haven't managed to raise it up. There we go.
It's heavy, huh, like this.
Renault's rebrand to Alpine for 2021 brought Fernando Alonso's return, creating one of the grid's most intriguing teammate pairings. Many observers expected the two-time world champion to completely overshadow Esteban, but the Frenchman had other ideas. The early 2021 season actually saw Esteban outscore Alonso, demonstrating his podium last year hadn't been a fluke. However, it was at the Hungarian Grand Prix that Esteban achieved the moment defining his career, his first Formula 1 victory. With a first corner incident eliminating several frontrunners and mixing up the order, Esteban found himself in the lead, but with Sebastian Vettel closing rapidly in final stages. With the four-time world champion applying constant pressure and the field behind ready to pounce on any mistake, Esteban drove with composure that had marked his junior career. Alonso even decided to help the youngster out by fighting Lewis Hamilton wheel-to-wheel for 10 laps, delaying the 7-time world champion just long enough to preserve Esteban's lead. With all that teamwork, Ocon managed to secure his maiden Formula 1 victory. But if 2021 had been largely harmonious between Ocon and Alonso, 2022 revealed strains that could develop even between teammates who respected each other. That year, Alonso suffered numerous reliability failures that cost him points, leading to frustration that occasionally boiled over into criticism of the team and, indirectly, of Esteban's racing. The breaking point came at the Sao Paulo Grand Prix sprint race in Brazil. Esteban and Alonso made contact twice on the opening lap, damaging both cars and ending what should have been a good point-scoring opportunity for Alpine. Seems familiar, right?
I lost the win, I think, thanks to our friend.
Alonso was thinking exactly the same. He then made comments to the media, emphasizing that this exact thing happened to Ocon, with Perez, with Verstappen, and the implication was clear. Alonso was suggesting controversial incidents were a pattern with Esteban. And that's not a good reputation to have in the sport where one incident on track costs your team like $1 billion. Still, with all of this criticism coming from his teammate, Esteban delivered one of his most consistent seasons, scoring 92 points, finishing 8th in Drivers' Championship, his best F1 result to date. More significantly, he achieved something that probably mattered enormously for him personally. He outscored Fernando Alonso for the season, becoming the first teammate to beat the Spanish legend since 2015.
Finally, to let it all go in the last lap, it felt great.
For 2023, Alpine created headlines by signing Pierre Gasly to partner Esteban, creating an all-French driver lineup that captured French motorsport fans' imagination. However, for those who knew the history between the two drivers, the partnership seemed almost improbable. Esteban and Pierre had known each other since karting days, but their relationship had been complex from the beginning. They'd been rivals as children. A falling out during teenage years meant they weren't particularly close as adults. Both drivers were aware of media fascination with their frosty relationship, but were determined to handle it professionally. The arrangement worked well initially. However, at the Australian Grand Prix, Pierre ran wide while avoiding another incident and collided with Esteban as he tried rejoining the track. Both Alpines crashed heavily, destroying what could have been double points finishes for the team. I mean, that's just bad luck at this point. Crashing so many times with your teammates is absolutely insane. Even though the incident was costly and frustrating, the aftermath demonstrated how both drivers had matured since junior days. Rather than engaging in public blame games or social media warfare, both immediately apologized to each other, focused on moving forward. But did they actually move forward? Nope. In Monaco that same year, Esteban made an aggressive move on Pierre that ended with both Alpine cars in the wall. Management was obviously livid at this point, with team boss Bruno Famin stating Esteban would face consequences for the needless collision. By summer 2024, it had become clear that Esteban's relationship with Alpine had run its course. However, before leaving Alpine, Esteban had one final opportunity to remind the world of his talent. At the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, in wet conditions recalling his karting days, he delivered a masterful drive to finish second, his best Alpine result, and a fitting farewell to the team where he'd achieved his greatest success. Podium finish helped Alpine secure 6th place in Constructors' Championship, providing Esteban with a vindication moment after all the season's difficulties. It also demonstrated that, beneath all controversy, criticism, his fundamental speed remained intact. To be honest with you, I don't think Ocon is a bad driver. I just think he was overly aggressive to his teammates because he wanted to be the star driver, and most of the times in his career he had the supporting role and it never sat well with him. With this in mind, Haas F1 team called almost immediately after the news of him leaving Alpine came out. They were looking for an experienced driver to lead their development efforts. And for Esteban, the move represented a fresh start, an opportunity to finally be the star driver paired with a rookie. When Esteban signed with Haas F1 team for 2025, he wasn't just joining another midfield outfit, he was accepting responsibility of becoming the team's most accomplished driver in history. Since Haas' debut in 2016, the American team had struggled establishing consistent competitiveness, often falling victim to strategic errors, technical problems, and internal conflicts. For team principal Io Komatsu, bringing Esteban to Haas represented more than just signing a fast driver. It was about importing a winning mentality and professional standards the team desperately needed. Perhaps no relationship better illustrated Esteban's evolution than his partnership with Oliver Bearman. Rather than trying to mold Bearman into a copy of himself, Esteban focused on sharing lessons learned through years of experience. And more importantly, he tried helping Bearman avoid some pitfalls that had marked his own early career. The young rookie didn't need to fight for respect or prove toughness through aggressive racing. He could focus on developing skills, building relationships, without the defensive mindset that had sometimes gotten Esteban into trouble. However, this didn't really translate into racing success at first. The season opener in Australia was still a disaster for Haas, with both cars finishing outside the points. The poor performance was particularly puzzling because it didn't match what the team had seen during preseason testing. The breakthrough moment came in the next race, where strategic opportunism created Haas's best two-car result in years, validating the team's driver pairing, showing both cars could be competitive simultaneously. And guess what? It's almost mid-season and Haas is consistently bringing home points. That honestly makes me almost tear up. One of the most remarkable aspects of Esteban's evolution during his Haas time was how perceptions of his character continued changing. The narrative that had followed him throughout career, that he was a fast but controversy-prone driver who couldn't be trusted in wheel-to-wheel combat, is being steadily replaced by recognition of his professionalism and leadership values. And honestly, I think his journey is far from over. Will Haas, under Ocon's leadership, climb into the top 6 teams? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.